Hey, everybody. Mark and I have over 20 years of experience as therapists and as addicts in long-term successful recovery. We know better than anyone what works and what doesn't to break out of porn and sex addiction, heal betrayal trauma, and reclaim your relationship.
And we've poured all of our personal and professional recovery and healing experience into a first-of-its-kind program for addicts, spouses, and couples. We call it Dare to Connect.
At least 4 times every week, we engage with you in real time, in the trenches, giving you the knowledge and the tools to take back your life and relationship.
Whatever else you've done on your journey for healing and recovery, you've never done anything like this.
Mark and I, we've made all the mistakes, so you don't have to. Don't reinvent the wheel.
We all know tomorrow never comes. Look, don't wait one more day to change. Claim your free 2-week trial today at daretoconnectnow.com.
Hey, everybody. I'm Steve Moore.
And I'm Mark Castleman.
We know the pain and heartbreak of porn and sex addiction.
And we know the triumph of breaking completely free.
Every day, we help our clients find hope and healing.
Join us in the fight to take back your life, your marriage, and be stronger than ever.
This is the PBSC Squared podcast.
So, Steve, we're back. Last week we made all the marriage mistakes so you don't have to, part 1. And this week we're back to do part 2. And we have all kinds of wonderful, raw, fun stories to get really real so that we can tell everybody about all the marriage mistakes you and I personally made. It's always a fun part of our podcast.
Absolutely.
As we were preparing for this and kind of talking about it, we have some good stories about marriage mistakes.
Yes.
And so we're hoping that as people hear this, first of all, they'll be able to be really honest about the fact that if they have any of these things that they're suffering from now, currently in their relationship, but also to not do what we did, was let it drag on for years or decades and start making changes now.
Absolutely.
Right? You can start adjusting right now. You don't have to stay on the same track. So with that, let's launch into this thing.
I love it.
First thing you and I talked about for part 2 here was this concept in marriage that we're not enemies. We're in this together.
Yeah.
And that might sound obvious, but boy, as I look back at the early years of my marriage, if I'm really honest, there were times where I did not believe that we weren't enemies.
I know, right? Seriously.
It's like, no, it's me against her.
Absolutely.
So maybe we can talk a little bit about that, especially how we get into that place.
Yeah.
You would think in a marriage, we've courted, we've dated, we're madly in love. This is my dream person I want to, I've always dreamed of, want to spend the rest of my life with. How in the world can we be enemies?
Yeah.
That makes no sense.
Except it does.
The process that lands you in that place. We think, just because you signed a marriage certificate and head out for your honeymoon doesn't mean that things are magically going to change. We bring with us everything that's happened to that marriage relationship. Sometimes I'll tell my clients, you need to realize that when you're headed off to your honeymoon, you've got your physical luggage, and then you've got all the other luggage that you can't see that you're bringing with you.
Yeah.
And that you're going to unpack in the relationship.
No, that is so true. I mean, I love this concept. You and I were talking about this, pre-recording, and it's so interesting how, both of our stories, but along with the stories of our clients, how there are many ways in which addicts find themselves kind of arriving at this point. But it's definitely one of the more common elements that I see with the guys that I work with that are married. And a lot of this stuff doesn't come from necessarily the relationship itself. I kind of had this for me. I kind of had the stage set in my childhood after my dad passed away. I came out of the funeral from that having heard a lot of, really really cute phrases like, you got to be the man of the house now. You got to take care of things. You're the guy who's got to watch out for these women. I had, two sisters and a mom, and those things are all like really cute, and they, it sounds like a valiant line in, like Anne of Green Gables, but it's not. But in real life, it's that's horrible advice to give to a 13-year-old kid. And I remember that coupled with some other experiences I had, I I I developed this notion of, in some ways you could say this was one of the biggest factors setting me up for really being pulled into the addiction in a really rough way, was I completely began to isolate myself from my entire family. I developed this notion that I've got to be the tough guy, right? I've got to be the man. I've got to be the one who weathers the storm and everyone else can rely on. I got to be like that stoic, you know, monolithic block of granite that everybody can just look to, take anything and be anything and whatever the case was. And so I took all of my grief, all of my anger and frustration, and basically just shoved it down, and then combined with that, cut myself off from really opening up to anybody, because I had to be strong. I had to be there for them. And that, we're going to talk more about it, but that played out in all sorts of nasty ways later on.
Yeah, and the result for me was similar to yours. I just had a different cause.
Yeah.
And so my growing up, I had a really tumultuous environment with my mom and stepdads, various relationships that she had there. And it was World War III all the time. They
Hmm.
were at each other. It was this, competition, and it was her versus him and him versus her. And what I realized very young was, wow, these adults in my life, this mom and dad that I have, they're so embroiled in their own stuff. They do not have one molecule of attention to give to me.
Yeah.
They have no capacity.
Yeah.
And then so I realized I'm on my own. I'm not going to go to them and ask for help or express my needs, or I just have to basically just pull up my bootstraps and go manage my own life.
Yeah.
So it was the same result that you're talking about, right? Stoic, like granite. You basically handle it. You don't get, touchy feely and expressive and quote, air your dirty laundry. You just take care of it.
Yeah.
And so I brought all of that attitude into my marriage.
Totally. Well,
And yeah,
Well, I mean, and you look how it plays out, right? I mean, we learn these things as kids, both of us. And I think a lot of our clients, a lot of our listeners probably fall in that same camp. And then you combine that with that culture that we've talked about many times about what it is to be, quote unquote, a man. I know that something you and I have in common is we were lacking strong father figures. I had a really strong father figure, but he was gone at 13, and that was it. And so all I had to go off of were these Anne of Green Gables phrases, the culture at large, and my experiences in life. And I continue to have more traumas that sort of reemphasize that. And so when I came into my marriage, I very much I think it was a valiant and well-intentioned view, but it was, I mean, I tried to be open and I tried to be vulnerable, but I was carrying so much of this baggage that we're talking about, that being able to be open and vulnerable was a struggle. And especially once we got a year into the marriage, we even though things were going really well, once the addiction started up again and the shame came back, it was really hard not to become more stoic. And that kind of became a defense mechanism, right? Anytime she would bring something up or a concern, I'd put on monolith Steve, and just be a block there. And it was effective and not having to be questioned, but always coming at the cost of connection.
well, and for me, because I saw so much warfare between the adult figures in my life, my wife jokes when I would see a negative expression on her face, or she'd raise an eyebrow, or I felt um, any dissatisfaction or concern coming from her toward me. My response was, "Oh crap, we're getting divorced."
Yeah. Yeah.
It was an instant reaction, right? And so then you go into this defense mode or offense mode
Mhm.
where it's me versus her. I got to
Yes.
protect myself, I got to hunker down, all the stuff that was modeled to me as a kid. And
Mhm.
that's what we do in marriage. I often ask my clients when they're saying, "Why do we behave this way? Why do we do this?" And I ask them, "Well, who modeled the marriage behavior for you? Where
Mhm.
did you learn it?" And as they think back, it's like, well, wow, I learned it from the home I grew up in.
Yes.
And, where else is it going to come from? You bring that with you. And so, of course, you're going to do what you were taught, you're going to do what you
Absolutely.
saw. And that's why it can be so difficult and frustrating because how do you start to, number one, become mindful of that, to literally be willing to step back and say, wow, maybe this isn't the best way or the right way. Maybe there's some room for change or improvement here. So it takes some mindfulness and some humility. And then you got to start doing the hard work of actually changing that wiring that was put into your brain, your social brain, of what you observed for what, 20 years of your life, 18 years of your life. You saw that modeled.
Yeah.
You're not going to change that in a little bit of effort in your marriage. It's gonna, it's a path, man.
Absolutely. Well, with most of our clients, I think, and I know this is the case for me, you kind of most of the guys I work with, we tend to develop an emotional dichotomy of sorts, right? Where on the one hand, you kind of have this outer exterior. This is how it looked for me, most definitely. You've got this outer exterior tough candy shell that we're talking about, right? Like, I'm tough, I'm strong, I got this. In my case, it was, hey, I'm a therapist. I don't need anyone telling me I got to quit acting out. I mean, whatever the case may be. And that actually just got stronger and stronger to compensate for the opposite, right? The inner insecure, mushy center, which was deep down being 100% convinced. I remember thinking this: Brittany is going to leave me. At some
Mm.
point, she is going to be done. She's going to wake up one day and be like, what the hell is with this guy? And just be out. And I lived in kind of a constant perpetual fear of that. I remember thinking to myself often, it's not a question of if this marriage is going to end. It's just how long can I keep this charade up before the curtain drops and, the Wizard of Oz is revealed for who he really is. And it's not going to be good.
Yeah. Yeah. And for me, if I mean, this is where we get to be like super raw on this podcast.
Hmm.
But if, there came a point in my marriage where, after my wife we'd been through a lot of rocky stuff for a long time. I'm trying to think back. It was probably 15 years of marriage when she finally came to the place where she just looked straight in my eyes one day and she said, I am really have to be honest with you and tell you I'm tired of being married to a little boy.
Oh, man.
And
Yeah.
I was just devastated, just like, oh, first of all, I can't believe she said that. And second, it just, my inner reaction was the very evidence that what she was saying was true. Because my
Yeah.
little boy freaked out when she said that.
Yeah.
She actually said, I don't know that I really can love the how you're behaving, that the person that you are.
Hmm.
She said, I need to be married to a man. And now we joke. She'll say, yeah, there was a period of our marriage, we have 5 sons. And so she'd say, yep, I was raising 6 boys. It's
Yeah.
kind of the joke. Now, a lot of guys hearing this podcast will say, well, wait a second. I mean, I work, I bring home a paycheck. I'm, as guys go, I'm solid. I'm get it done. I'm
Yeah.
one of those kind of guys. I got to do the yard work. I lift heavy things.
Yeah.
No, I can do manual labor. That's not what my wife was saying.
Hmm.
She wasn't
Yeah.
questioning that. What she was saying was, there's too many times where when I disagree with you or I express my strong opinion or we have some conflict, you disappear.
Yeah.
You kind of curl up in this little boy ball, and emotionally you bail on me.
Hmm.
And that's what little boys do when things get emotionally tough. I need you emotionally to stand up and be a man. She's actually saying in
Yeah.
some ways, I need you to emotionally stand up to me.
Yeah.
Like, let's be equal and go head to head in
Yes.
our discussions and our honesty and our vulnerability. I need to be equal with you in that way. And we're
Yeah.
not.
Yeah, and no, geez, I love what you're saying. I mean, and this goes back to that. There's a lot of dynamics at play. We've already talked about some, but then you throw in that whole, which is proven to be true: men are fixers, women are processors concept, right?
Mhm.
And what you end up with, I mean, I remember thinking the same thing. There would be times when my wife would try to get vulnerable with me, and I was, of course, averse to it. And she'd just say, you're just not here. And I remember saying, like, what in the I've already said hell once, so I'm not gonna say it again. What what do you want from me? I cleaned the GD bathroom, right? Like, I made dinner last night. Like, I took out the trash without you telling me. Like, what do you want from me? And
Right.
there's this notion that, it's like, in essence, what you're saying is or what I was saying was, "Hey, look at me. I'm checking the boxes." And I was checking the boxes in certain areas, obviously not with the addiction and fidelity side, but I was checking the boxes in these other areas. And what she was needing is exactly what you're talking about. It was this be with me concept.
Mm.
I mean, just thinking back on how resistant I was to it and how open and vulnerable my wife was and how much I hurt her, it's hard to not get emotional on the podcast just thinking about that. It was almost a pleading, right? Just be with me in this moment, be with me in what I'm feeling, connect with me today, here, now. I don't need more dinners. I don't need more. I don't need the lawn to be mowed twice in a week. I need you here with me. And as addicts, when we're not in recovery because of all these other reasons, we are anything but.
Yeah, I had a tough time with that. All the guys they work with have an initial tough time with understanding this thing called be fully present. Be where you are. The guys will say, "Well, what do you mean? I'm here. I'm standing on the carpet in this location. What
Yeah.
do you mean? I'm here. I'm with you." Except our wives, they can sense that we're not emotionally fully present, that we're not being fully transparent and open with them. We're there, but we're not there. And as I look back on my heavy addiction years, I now realize that, yeah, I was physically in the house with my wife and my kids, but dad was gone. You know, Mark was someplace else.
Yeah.
And so this concept, you can't go shift from me to we. You can't go to this place, we're not enemies. We're in this together. We're one. You can't do that if you're not willing to learn this concept of being fully present.
Yeah.
It's the classic image of the guy who's sitting on the couch. Well, he's in his reclined armchair. Let's get honest. His wife's on the couch next to him. He's watching a football game. She's talking to him in his right ear, right?
Hmm.
And he thinks he's fully present. And he's just like, "Yeah, dear. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm."
Yes.
And he's watching the football game, right? It used to be the old cliche. He's reading the newspaper while his wife is talking to him. And she's like, "Put down the damn paper and be with me."
Absolutely. Absolutely. Oh, it's so true. Well, and this kind of bleeds into that, our next topic you had actually mentioned just a little bit is this being able to see your spouse on equal terms, right? I know that's one that you and I discussed pretty heavily is something that I wish both of us had done differently. And in my experience, both, personally and with clients, I kind of see that coming from two sides. There's the side that is probably the more well, I don't know if one is more or less common, but the equality tends to look like either like this, right? Husband above wife, or even the other. And it happens for different reasons. For me, going back to that whole, this is a sham, my wife's going to figure it out one day kind of a concept. There was a lot of, I mean, no wonder she couldn't figure me out, right? Because on the one hand, there'd be this stoic outer candy shell, and then once in a while the mushy center would show itself and be like, whatever you think, whatever you want, I'm okay with whatever. I don't care what we eat. I don't care. just as long as you're happy, you know? And so it'd just be like these total, like different opposite ends of like, why are you asking me what I want, lady? And then all the way to the other end of the spectrum, like, I don't know, whatever's best for you, you know? And it was just never, because there was always this oscillating notion, and I could never see I had the hardest time deep down seeing myself on equal terms with my wife. She was so far above me in like every way that mattered. And I felt you know me, I hate this word, but I just felt unworthy of her. I
Mm.
just felt unworthy of being with her. I felt like I could not and would not measure up. And so yeah, so she was married to, you know, on the outside would just look like, I don't know what's going on with this guy, because he's stoic and standoffish and whatever. And then the next minute he's, you know, like he doesn't have an opinion on anything. He's just a spineless jellyfish, and then, you know, everything in between.
Hey, everybody, Mark and Steve here. Are you looking to take your recovery and your marriage to the next level?
We work with individuals and couples one-on-one.
With both in-person and online therapy options, you have access to the experts anytime, anywhere.
To learn more, visit us at pbscpodcast.com.
Yeah, it's this crazy paradox, where, and my wife now, as we've talked over the years that we've been really healthy, she would say, yeah, I didn't know who was going to show up in any given moment. Was it going to be the opinionated, you know, passionate, authority on everything, right about everything, Mark, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or is it going to be this sort of wimpy, whining, scared? Oh, sweetheart, are you okay? Right? How can I make you happy? Did I say something wrong? You
Yes,
know, that whole thing, and the vacillation, but the ping pong ball, the ping pong match of which Mark is it? And
totally.
that's what finally got her to the thing I just expressed, a few minutes ago, where she just got tired of being, when the little boy would show up.
Yes,
And I see this a
absolutely.
lot. So this thing of being equally yoked, being on equal terms with each other. I see
Mm-hmm.
guys who, without knowing it, without being conscious of it, they're very dominating. They're
Yeah.
very intimidating, and that shocked me years later when my wife and I really got healthy, and I was in strong recovery and a bit sober a long time, and she had kind of been on her healing journey. She could say to me honestly, you know what, Mark, there were a lot of times during the early years of our marriage where I was just kind of scared of you. Now, not
Yes.
physically, I was never physically abusive,
Yes.
but she she was scared of expressing her opinion or taking a strong stance when she believed in something, if it was counter to what I was claiming as my position, because I would become so dominant and so strong in, my voice would change,
Yeah.
and my whole approach, where, her opinion just wasn't as valid, as smart, as evolved, as intelligent as mine was, and she
Yeah.
could feel that. And I
Absolutely.
was kind of shocked. I had to go, wow, really? I intimidated you?
Mm-hmm.
And then as I look back, I was like, whoa, you're right. And so where did that come from? It came from the fact that I did not feel inside as strong and powerful and confident as I was portraying on the outside.
Yeah.
And so we
Yeah.
compensate and we come
Totally.
across as, I'm going to steamroll you if you disagree with me or suggest that I might be mistaken.
It's Mark's hard candy shell.
Mark's hard candy shell, right? Yeah, masking and hiding the soft, chewy center.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, there are some things that happen in a marriage. You know, I think we all have these. Maybe we don't, but I definitely have had where there are things that have happened or things that I've done that I wish I could just take back like about a half second after they happen.
Yeah.
And as you're talking about that, I mean, I remember distinctly one day being in the living room, and my wife came in, and we'd had a rough day. I think I'd knowing where I was, I'm sure I'd relapsed recently. That's not out of the ballpark. And she came in and wanted to really talk. And this is after I already been stoic. And I remember she walked in the room and I already had the phrase loaded for bear. She came in and she tried to talk to me. I just looked at her and I just said, "Look, I don't know what to tell you. This is who I am and it's not going to change. And if you don't like it, there's the door. Get yourself out."
Oh,
I know. I mean, I say it now and it just makes me like physically ill. Um, I just cannot. I am shocked at how those words would even come out of me, because that's so out of character for me. But what it
mm,
was, very much not making an excuse for it, but it was that defense mechanism, right? It's that guy that's deep down, for all the reasons that we've been talking about on this podcast so far, was saying, you cannot, you must not, you will not be vulnerable. You cannot be in the moment with this person. You're not safe. You're not worth them. You're not enough. You can't let them see who you are. Like, you have to keep that defended at all costs.
yeah. Yeah. It's like, it's the big joke, right? I'd rather be dead than wrong.
Yes,
It's
absolutely.
just like,
Perfect,
what?
perfect line.
And what what we don't, what we can't come to grips is, because no one's helped us see it, is all of that is just the way that we've learned to self-protect.
Yes.
It's that amazing but frustrating survival brain, using tactics and strategies that it developed when you were small. You
Yeah.
just learned how to survive, and to,
Hmm.
to put up your big wall around you and your strategies, and you carry those into your relationship and you keep using them
Yeah.
until you get to the place where you're at least willing to start to let down your guard and start to look at what is underneath all of this. What's driving these behaviors of mine? Can I
Yeah.
become mindful that I go silent? I give my wife the silent treatment.
Hmm.
Why do I do that? That doesn't make sense. Why would you shut down? Why would you disappear when the healthy thing to do is to open up and actually dialogue?
Yeah.
Nope, I go quiet and shut down and disappear. Well, there's a reason for that. Or
Yeah.
why do I erupt with anger like a trip hammer? Just boom, there's the anger switch, and now Mark is raging. Well,
Totally.
that's not healthy and normal. So what's that about? So to get to the place where you're willing to start to look at these things is so critical.
Absolutely. Well, and there's one last element to this, and I'm watching our time, so we don't want to overextend everybody. But this is, I know we know that we try to put a joking spin on this. This is pretty heavy stuff for a lot of you out there, and
Yeah.
we're aware of that.
Yeah.
We're able to look back on it now, and hopefully a little bit of healthy humor makes it a little more bearable, because it is hard. Um, but there is one last element to this. Begin to looking at your spouse on equal terms. I know that I have clients, and I know that you have clients. We've talked about this, both past and current, who really struggle for other reasons to see their spouse as an equal. Aside from the shame, aside from the other components, because of their upbringing, right? There was an actual like portrayal of that, sometimes even in word. Men are better than women. Um, and that still goes on today. It's less
Yes.
prevalent, but still happens. And then we won't even get into it for sake of time, but the pornography factor that we talk about so often, right, in so many ways feeds into that line of thinking that women are use the terminology subservient, which I love, right? It's this notion of men are kind of the ones that are superior. They're the ones who are in charge or in control or driving the sexual encounter or whatever the case is, and the wife is kind of being dominated over.
Yes.
Far too common, right? And I guess the thing that I would say to that is I mean, all I can do is speak to my own truth with that. When I look at my wife now, and I ascribe to the idea that my wife and I, we are a son and a daughter of God, respectively. When I think about the fact that she is, because of that, in my book, royalty, and when I look at her and I think back on our dating and how much we've gone through in this recovery process and how much she's been patient with in my mistakes and been there for both my victories and my downfalls and everything in between, the fact that she exercised her agency in one point in time and could have chosen to be with anybody, and for some, in some ways, still unfathomable reason, decided to choose me. I just can't help but see her on those terms. And I know that that's a struggle for some of you out there, but would really, in a loving but forceful way, encourage you to take a long, hard look at how you're viewing your spouse. Because a marriage cannot operate in a healthy place when one is domineering over the other, either way. It's a team effort. Your wife did not sign up to be, subservient to you, nor did she sign up to be domineering and running the show. She signed up for a partner. And if you can, as you work on yourself and work on the insecurities and those things that hold you back, that's the thing that you want to, one of the many things you want to be looking for to be pacing with, is being able to really see, using Mark's phrase, into me you see, the exercising true intimacy and really seeing her for who and what she is. Because I guarantee you, the more accurately you see that, the more those old, frankly, archaic attitudes will dissipate.
No, I love that. And I'll just say one final thing before we kind of wrap up with our last point. We a lot of times, I was just talking with a client about this the other day. If your reason for disengaging from pornography or sexual addiction to stop those behaviors, if your primary motivation is because it's bad, evil, wicked, and dirty,
Hmm.
that is not going to be enough
No.
to drive you to make the right decisions and to get sober and stay that way. It's just not enough.
Yeah.
However, as you start to evolve in your thinking, and we talk about this thing of being one with our spouse, coming to this place of being equally yoked. If you take a look at the form of pornography and what it portrays in
Hmm.
relation to the relationship between man and woman, it is exactly opposite of what we've been talking about today. It
Yes.
is not equally yoked. every Virtually every portrayal in it shows an unequal relationship where one is domineering and the other one is subservient, right? This concept of the woman servicing the man.
Yeah.
And I don't want to get too blunt about this, but I invite the guys who are listening to this, if you're having an issue with pornography, start to consider, do I want to be involved with something that portrays such an unequal relationship?
Yeah.
Because you have to admit that because you're seeing it and participating in it, you cannot avoid modeling the behaviors that you're viewing.
Absolutely.
I mean, advertisers, if they can affect us in a 30-second ad and literally affect our behaviors, which is shown in research, then what does 30 minutes or an hour or 2 hours of pornography do to
Yeah.
our resulting behaviors? So just in the spirit of respect and equal man and woman relationships, that in and of itself is a reason to disengage from that pornography.
Absolutely. And I love what you're saying. You can't wallow in a mud slop and expect to not come out dirty to some degree.
Yeah.
You just can't, and it's so true. Well, we'll wrap up with our last but definitely not least point, right? Which is learning to let go of your spouse's recovery and let her own it. Letting go of control. Now, I know that this concept is going to be foreign to pretty much everyone listening because nobody on this podcast is controlling in any way. So that would definitely not apply to anyone, maybe just to Steve. But if by any chance it does apply to you, there's speaking to my own experience, and again, this is reflected in the lives of clients I see all the time. Um, More than I realized, looking back, far more actually than I realized, I was trying to make recovery in my own life not just happen on my terms. I was trying, which never works. Recovery never happens on your terms. Okay, there's a tidbit for the day, ever.
Hmm. Yeah.
But I was trying even more logically. I was trying to kind of make her recovery happen on my terms. And I remember I did that out of all sorts of points of fear. One of them is going back to what we were talking about before. Man, if she gets recovery and she starts expecting stuff, what does that mean, right? Like, what does that
Yeah.
mean for us? And the reality is that the harder you try to control your spouse's recovery, two things are gonna happen. She's gonna continue to struggle with her own self-confidence, her own gaslighting, her own, the gaslighting you're portraying with her, all of the thinking errors and the insanity that come with betrayal trauma, and she's going to resent you in the process as well. For me, I was reading a popular religious leader favorite of mine's quote. And I was reading through this talk that he'd given, and I was in kind of an early recovery stage, and this phrase just jumped out off of the page. He was talking about the relationship with his wife, and how in other ways, not in a addiction way, but in other ways, he recognized he'd been in some ways kind of domineering. And he said, I'm going to butcher the quote a little bit, but he said, at some point in time, I finally came to the realization that I just needed to get out of her way and let her fly. And
Mm.
like just totally backhanded me across the face this concept of, you know what? I'm not the expert. And I'm definitely not the expert on my own life. I'm most certainly not on hers. And the more I'm able to let go of her recovery and focus on my own, she's going to be able to be the woman that she truly wants to and is meant to be, instead of being molded in some way into what I think she should be or what we should be.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. You and I often talk about, couples who are in crisis because of addiction and betrayal trauma often will think that the answer is to immediately jump into couples counseling. Let's
Yes.
fix our marriage and
Hmm.
then everything will be fine, except it doesn't work that way.
Yep.
A lot of my clients have actually come to me out of couples counseling where it just didn't succeed.
Hmm.
And so the thing that has to happen is that you have to, in some ways, be an individual. So I'm going to individually work on my recovery and doing what I need to do to break out of this addiction and get healthy.
Hmm.
My wife is going to be working on her recovery and her, healing from betrayal trauma and traveling her path. And so they're separate paths, but they're parallel. And the beauty is, as we both allow each other to make progress on those individual paths, they now start to come together. And you'll
Yes.
find that there's this natural interweaving of the paths as they now over time do truly become one. But you can't start that way. You
Yeah.
have to allow each other to do the individual work. Now you can support each other, right? You
Hmm.
can be a cheerleader and you can try to provide an environment where each can travel their path, but they still have to travel their path, and you need to be willing to let them do that.
Yeah. Well, and there's a lot of fear, and I know a lot of guys out there. I hear this one really commonly all the time. It's kind of what I was alluding to before, where if I let go, what's going to happen? Will she stick around? Will she stay? And to be honest with you, there is no guarantee of that. But I can guarantee you one thing: if you continue down that path, if you are in fact, trying to manage or manipulate or kind of direct that recovery, you're really choosing to end your marriage just in a really slow way, because nobody can function in a relationship, you or your spouse, in a relationship in which they can't be them.
Yes.
And the sooner you're able to just get out of the way and take ownership of your own stuff, devote that and channel that energy into your own recovery, and you allow her to do the same thing, even though there is that risk, right, that maybe the marriage won't last. The other side of it, and what I see far more commonly, is that the former is a lot less common, and the following is a lot more so. Your wife actually now has the freedom for maybe the first time ever to actually really choose you
Mm,
on her own terms. Not because
yes.
she's being forced into it or gaslighted into it or cajoled or whatever the case is, but because she is a strong, independent woman, the woman that you always wanted to be with all along, and is saying, you know what? I could leave. I could be done. You have hurt this relationship a lot, but you're worth it, and I'm worth it, and I choose us.
Yeah.
There are far few feelings in the world that are better than that one.
Well, and I have a personal experience about that I'll kind of finish up with in my comments today. So after a lot of work on my personal recovery and my wife doing a lot of her work, a number of years ago, it came to the place where I let her truly see me with all of my stuff, good, bad, the good, the bad, and the ugly, so to speak. She knew me for the first time fully.
Yeah.
I had opened myself up and been vulnerable and transparent. It was hard, it took years. But then one day she came to me. I'll never forget this. She actually embraced me and hugged me. And you can feel a real hug, right?
Yeah.
It's just so intimate and just so all encompassing. And then she whispered in my ear and she said, "You are precious to me."
Mm.
And
Yeah.
I'm feeling chills right now just sharing that. But after seeing the real me, everything about me, and then her choosing to be with that guy,
Yeah.
there's something liberating about knowing my wife knows everything about me and
Yeah.
she chooses me. And
Yeah.
not only does she choose me, I'm precious to her. That
Y
changed me. I swear to you, I was just like,
I love it.
wow,
That is
wow.
incredible. Yep, those kinds of experiences they definitely are touching on the eternal in my book.
Yeah,
Those are amazing things.
yeah.
Well, everybody, it's been great. Sorry we went a little bit over time, but we kept it under 40 minutes.
Which is amazing for us.
These all of these topics that we've talked about the last couple of episodes, I know that we scanned them briefly. As always, we would love to hear from you. If you want to hear more about any one of these topics on any given podcast, send us an email, shoot us an email, visit us at pbscpodcast.com. And there's a contact form on there. You can ask questions. You can say what you like about the show, what you don't like. We'd love to hear from you. And we're happy to guide these episodes in a way that, is going to resonate most with you guys and be of the most help. We appreciate you tuning in with us each week. So with regard to the assignment this week, I think we're going to probably just continue largely along the lines with last week, which is to pick one of these things to work on. But I think I'd expand on that a little bit more this week. If any of you are not, if any of you have a spouse who is not listening to this podcast, I would strongly, strongly recommend that you have them listen to it and set a goal. If you're looking for an easy way to establish some connection this week, and a really and a way to be able to bring up some healthy topics and some things to discuss in maybe a less direct way, less confrontational way, share this episode with your spouse, whoever whatever end that is, and set a goal to talk about at the end of the week. What did you like? What did you not? What things do you want to recommit to and change, and where do you want to go? So
Love it.
awesome. Thanks everybody. Have a great day.
See you next week. That's all for today. Thanks for joining us. And remember, the opposite of addiction isn't sobriety, it's connection. Together, we can do the impossible.
To learn more about Mark and Steve and to listen to more podcast episodes, visit us at pbscpodcast.com. Everything expressed on the PBSC podcast are the opinions of the hosts and the participants and is for informational and educational purposes only. This podcast should not be considered mental health therapy or as a substitute thereof. It is strongly recommended that you seek out the clinical guidance of an individual qualified mental health professional. If you're experiencing thoughts of suicide, self-harm, or a desire to harm others, please dial 911 or go to your nearest emergency room.